a PhD in the FLU. So in many ways, I am not somebody from outer space who has come to give you a lecture. I am one of you who is here to talk about something which I probably slightly know more than you, because I have done some research in that area, right? Okay. I'll start with an activity I want you to do. I can see there is a very interactive group. And so if you would like to please click on this link that I just shared with you. I'll be grateful. Yeah, you can either click on that link, or you can go to www.menti.com and type the code 89493516. Does it work?
Oh, it's asking for sign up.
Oh, wait. I think I sent you a wrong link. Stop sharing. I'm sorry. Don't click on that link. Click on this link. Sorry, click on this link. I'm sorry. My apologies for that goof up.
This link is working.
Yeah.
So only I have clicked on the I can understand at least 4 languages.
Oh, okay. Which
So
are they, Dr. Ganga?
English, Hindi, Maithili, and Nepali.
Okay. And your mother tongue is?
Maithili.
Maithili. Nice gradient.
Yes. Now
So still only Dr. Ganga is standing in the third row.
Yes. We have maximum participants from Madhya Pradesh, and they have Hindi
and English.
Some of them has a regional language. Otherwise, those who are living in city, for them Hindi and English too.
Regional language, you mean?
They have the local languages also, like some of them are in the Wareli area. So Wareli is one of the languages. Some of them also have some local language. I don't know much. Wareli is somehow near Indore and similar areas. So I know one language, which is Wareli.
Okay, so that I'm just moving on, because I think only about 14 of you have 15 of you have responded. That's okay. It could be inertia, it could be dealing with technology, it could be some other hesitancy. That's okay. I'm going to move to the next question. I request you to answer the next question. Moving from numbers to actual languages. So I'm guessing English and Hindi would be the overwhelming number, because most of you chose 2. I thought of putting 1, but then it would be meaningless, because I'm doing this workshop or this session in English, and you live in a Hindi speaking area, which surely you must be knowing 2 languages. So I thought 1 would be a no-brainer. So I chose not to put 1 in the previous question. Okay, so English is right in the middle. Marwadi, okay, nice. Kannad, okay. It's interesting you use the spellings K-A-N-N, triple N, of course you meant double N, and A-D. You didn't put an A after Kannad. Usually the Kannada speakers call it Kannada. Right, Marwadi, Nepali, Urdu. Of course. Father, mother. Oh. Okay. Father, mother, daughter, son. The languages you understand. Fantastic. That's very metaphorical. Uh, Punjabi, Marwadi, English, Hindi, and Sindhi. Okay. So we put it as one word. Okay. Uh, so Maithili, English, Hindi, overwhelming. I'll wait for 10 because I've got 8 responses, 9. Okay. Bundelkhandi, interesting. Thank you. I wait for one more response. Can you mute yourself if you're not speaking? Thank you. Marathi, Garwali, very nice. Okay.
हाँ
I'll stop here.
हाँ नहीं अभी नहीं हुए 4:30 बजे आती
प्रतिमा जी अपने आप को म्यूट कीजिए प्लीज. थैंक यू. हाँ. Right. Yeah. So that was just the background I wanted to put for this context, right? Yeah. Let me go back to here. So we did a small exercise on my languages, that is the languages I know and which languages I know. So, and we saw that most of us are fluent or reasonably fluent in English and Hindi. And I saw several other languages, including Kannada, Maithili, Nepali, Bundelkhandi, uh, and just that other one. Yeah, and so on, right? Garwali, I think. Yeah. Thank you for that. That is our context, right? So as individuals, we speak many languages. We did that exercise. But there are also many languages in the society around us, right? So, and if you talk about India itself as a nation and as a society, how many languages do we have? We have various places where sources where we can get this data from. One is the census, right? So we know that every 10 years there is a census that is conducted and then data is thrown up by the census. What is the data that census gives us? So over the years, we have seen that the number of mother tongues that the census data gives, 1652, 1576, 1635, 1369. So roughly 1,500 languages are treated as mother tongues within the country. Within India, when people say, what is your mother tongue? I mean, this is a rationalized number, right? So if you take as raw languages, I think something like that, the census uses the term, that's like thousands, many thousands. But this is rationalized as actual mother tongues. 1,500 is the range, right? So you see in 1961 it was 1652, and 2011 the latest census it is 1369, right? So why does this number vary? There are several factors, we'll discuss that. Now these thousands of mother tongues are further rationalized into number of languages, right? So each census throws up a certain number. The latest census which we have, 2021, we haven't conducted thanks to COVID, but we are depending on the previous one, which is 2011, 121 languages as per the census in India. Out of that, 22 languages are special, 99 languages are considered not so special. We'll discuss that in a little while. This is from the census. There is also something conducted by an informed organization led by Dr. Devi, People's Linguistic Survey of India, right? So they employ people to conduct a survey across the country, and they collect data about how many languages are spoken in India and so on, just the mother tongues. And there is no rationalization here. So whatever language they say, that's reported, right? So in the 2010 to 12, when this data was collected, we had 780 languages in India, as per the People's Linguistic Survey of India. We have a global organization called Ethnologue, SIL, don't worry about those terms. According to their data, in India, we have 461 languages, out of which 14 are extinct And so 447 living languages. So within that, they have various categories about how many are thriving, how many are dying and dangerous, risk at the risk of death and so on. But 447. So the bottom line is, wherever you take data from, we know easily that in India we have hundreds of legitimate languages. Legitimate, I mean languages that are absolutely different from each other, right? So we have 121 languages which people speak at the minimum. That is the census data, which is completely pruned and rationalized. And there are others who say it's 447 and or it's 780. And if you go by mother tongues itself, it runs to thousands, right? So India is a very richly multilingual country, no doubt about that. Why is there a different data set from census within the census across the years? Why is the different data set for People's Linguistic Survey of India? Why is it different data for Ethnologue? Obviously, because the way in which data is collected is different. What kind of question you ask when you collect data is different. How do you decide whether your language is a dialect or it's a language? It's different, right? So I'm glad that some of you mentioned Bundelkhandi and Garhwali and so on, which the census data clubs under Hindi, right? So if I ask you what's your mother tongue, you are likely to say Hindi, because Hindi is the language enumerated by the census. It's very unlikely that you would say Bundelkhandi or Garhwali or that kind of stuff, right? So we should know this before we get into the actual context. Why is this data useful? I mean, whenever we talk about the languages in any place, we need to know what are the languages that are used, how many languages are used, and so on and so forth. Because all decisions that you make based on languages have to be based on actual data. You cannot simply shoot in the air and take decisions, right? So these decisions have to be made on the basis of data. And so we have various ways in which we can collect data about how many languages are used and so on. And that is why this data is useful. I'm sorry, I'm going in a hurry because there's a lot to do in less than an hour. If you have any question, anything to argue with me about or talk to me about or comment on, feel free to talk about it. Because I'm presenting a PPT on Google Meet, I'm unable to see the chat box. But if there's something and you think it's important, please unmute yourself and talk about it. At any point of time you want to stop me, you can stop me. You can feel free to talk. To stop me wherever, and we can have a discussion. Right. But I'm going to speak quickly and move because there's a lot to do. Right. How is the data collected? The question of what is a language or what is a dialect becomes important. If I'm a census enumerator or a data collector, I'll ask you, okay, what's your language? And you say Garhwali. Okay, Hindi. Right? If I decide as an enumerator that Garhwali is not a language, it's only a dialect, I'll put it as Hindi, even at that point, right? So how do you decide what is a language or what is a dialect becomes an important question when data is collected about languages. Also, how you consider, what language do you think is your mother tongue? That's a very open-ended question, because there are emotions which are attached with it. There's a question of identity that is associated with it. People like to call themselves as mother tongue speakers of Marwadi. I saw Marwadi, of course. Marwadi, Mewari, all these languages, which are languages which are legitimate mother tongues, but then subsumed under Hindi in the census data, right? So do you call yourself as a mother tongue speaker of Hindi, which is very convenient, or would you stick your neck out and say, no, I am not a mother tongue speaker of Hindi per se, I'm actually a mother tongue speaker of Bundelkhandi or Garhwali and so on, right? So that kind of colors the data that is collected. That's the point I was trying to make. Now, there is linguistic diversity in India, but how are these languages recognized officially, right? So we have, of course, we are a republic, so we have a constitution, and we have places where this is all put down. Now, if you look at the data of the ethnologue and see the top 10 countries with the number of languages, actually it's underreported, right? So if you go by some logic, which is 700 languages, or if you go by 1,500, 1,300, then actually we would be the topmost country. But anyway, from ethnologue's data, India has 454 living languages, and it's ranked fourth in terms of the number of languages that are spoken in a country, right? So in terms of the richness of languages, in terms of linguistic diversity, we are a very richly linguistically diverse country. That is a given, right? Now, how is it recognized by the official context? We have a constitution, right? The constitution mentions Hindi as the official language of India. The constitution itself is written in English, but it recognizes, I'm sorry about the darkness because we just lost power for a few minutes. We'll get it back. Can you see me?
Yes, sir. You are visible, sir.
In the sense that, I'll just open this. Okay, we got back to power. I was just going to open the window, I think, yeah. So, in terms of, I mean, the Constitution itself is written in English, the original Constitution, but it was decided by the Constituent Assembly members after much debate and discussion that Hindi will be called the official language of India. But because, I mean, for practical reasons, they said, no, let's continue with English as an associate official language for 15 years, after which we will wean out, let me say, English, and then we move to Hindi completely as the official language of India. Of course, we had several protests which happened in around 1963-65, just before this 15-year period was ending, because we started in 1950, we adopted the constitution in 1950. So by the time there were a lot of protests in some parts of the country, mostly in the south and the east, and they said, no, it's a disadvantage for us because our languages are not similar to Hindi and so on and so forth. So because of political reasons, it was decided by Jawaharlal Nehru and everybody else that we would continue with English as an associate language, associate official language for a long period of time, almost like forever, right? So English and Hindi are recognized as the official languages in the Constitution. There is also a schedule, a list in the Constitution, which is called the 8th schedule, right? So 8th schedule is a list of languages which began with 14 languages. And they say that the government recognizes these languages which are in the 8th schedule as languages which can be used for official purposes. So states can choose their official language. States can use any of these languages in the 8th schedule to communicate with the central government and so on and so forth, right? So, so in a way, Hindi, English, and all the languages which are mentioned in the 8th schedule are also official languages, right? Languages which can be used for official purposes. Now, within the 8th schedule, it was 14, and now we have 22 languages in the 8th schedule, right? Now, how do you decide that which languages will be in the 8th schedule? Will you just simply look at the census data and say, okay, the topmost spoken in terms of population, top 22 will be the languages in the 8th schedule? No. There are political reasons in this, right? So, for example, Sanskrit is nowhere in the top many languages in terms of numbers. I think 0.5% or up to 3%, I can't remember the exact number now, of the population speaks Sanskrit. But we have Sanskrit in the 8th schedule, right? And we have several tribal languages which are spoken by lakhs of people. Bili, for example, is spoken by lakhs of people, not included in the 8th schedule, right? So there's a lot of, there are political reasons. This is not a civics or a political science lesson. This is, we are dealing with English language teachers, but as teachers of language in India, we need to know this. That's why I'm putting this background into the context, right? There is also, newly, there's the context of classical languages in India. We just touch upon it. You can Google it if you want, right? Okay, now coming to the language that we teach, English in multilingual India. Now, how is it different that we are teaching English in India vis-a-vis teaching English in any other part of the world, right? There is a history to it. There is a historical context. What is the historical context? Before the independence, I mean, historically, when you look at what are the languages which are officially used in India, I mean, we had several languages in the past. We had Sanskrit and Prakrit. Then we had Persian for a long period of time up to the decline of the Mughals. And then in 1830s, Thomas Babington Macaulay proposed the minutes, right? Macaulay's minutes, 1831. Bentinck, who was the Governor General of India at that point, East India Company at that point, he accepted the recommendations made by what is Macaulay's recommendation? Go for English as medium of instruction in education, and go for institutions which use English as a medium of promote them, and so on and so forth, right? So it was a historic moment in history in terms of language use in India. 1835 decision that we would move from the languages that we're using today to, that was Sanskrit and Persian basically, to English, right? So that was the turning point. Of course, it is dubious. People say that the very reason, the very motive for Macaulay to introduce English in India, English medium education in India, was dubious, because he says we need a class of people who will be interpreters between us and the millions we govern, a class of people who are Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, English in opinion, English in morals, and English in intellect. So even though on the outside, that is in terms of the skin color and in terms of the color of the blood, of course, we would be Indians in terms of our identity maybe, but in all our tastes, opinions, morals, and intellectually, we would be like the people in England, right? So that was the motive behind, one of the motives behind introducing English medium education in India. We need to know this as teachers of English, right? Continuing with the same topic, there are, I mean, if you look at the introduction of English in India in the past and currently, we see that, just switch the AC on, it's very cold, very hot. Right, so we see that there are two contexts. One is the top-down approach, that is, how do the officials allow English to percolate in society? And the second is the bottom-up process, right? So the top-down process, governmental patronage for English began in the 1830s, right? So schools, colleges which used English, universities which used English, official communication began to happen in English. I'm sorry, yeah. And so on. So top down, it was English. Indian Constitution itself, as I mentioned earlier, was written in English. Judiciary uses English. I mean, started using English from then and still uses it. Governments use English. Interstate communication today is mostly dependent on English. Tertiary education from colleges and universities mostly depend on English. Media is overwhelmingly in English. So if you look at English, there is an overwhelming presence around us in society, in multilingual India. Bottom up, there is support from formerly disadvantaged groups like Dalits, right? So people who were traditionally disadvantaged groups in India because of the caste system and so on, they have vouched for English, and they said, we don't want mother tongue medium education. We want English medium education because English is the passport to success. So for us, we have been kept out of the system because we are Dalits. We cannot afford to miss out on time now. We need to get back to the mainstream. We need to do well in life, and that will happen only if you know English. So there is a bottom-up support from for English from formerly disadvantaged groups like Dalits. So we have the context of Chandraban Prasad's English Goddess and so on. We have Dalit scholars, activists like Kancha Ilaya calling for English medium education and so on. And we also notice this in person, right? So the urban poor, people who live in the slums in cities, they pay high school fees in private, high school fees as in not high school. They pay an exorbitant school fees in private English medium schools, so-called English medium schools, I put it in inverted commas, instead of in free government schools for their children. So they can easily send their children to government schools for free education in the urban areas, but they choose to send their children to private schools in the vicinity, which claim to be English medium schools, with the belief that if my child goes to an English medium school, he or she will not have to suffer uh, the poverty that I am suffering, right? So that kind of bottom-up support is also there for English. Now, why do we have to talk about the constitution, official policy, and so on and so forth, right? So if we look at the education ladder, we start with what is the policy that is made for teaching languages in schools or colleges, using languages in education. Then there is planning that happens based on this policy. After that, there is a curriculum which is formed. Okay, this is the curriculum that we need to follow. Based on the curriculum, a syllabus is designed for each subject. Based on a syllabus, as teachers, we use lesson plans in the class, and we also choose what languages to use in the classroom based on this top-down approach, right? So what policy is decided, it's important for people like us who are using languages in the classroom, because policy in many ways determines what we actually do, what we transact in the actual classroom, right? So what is the policy in India for languages in education? The United Nations UNESCO National Curriculum Framework 2005, the Right to Education Act 2009, the National Education Policy, which Dr. Ganga just mentioned, even the recent one, 2020, completely recommends mother tongue based multilingual education, right? Ample research has also suggested that we need to go for multilingual education. So what have we done? Okay, how do we teach multiple languages? I said there is a 3-language formula which was formulated, and he said, okay, every Indian child will learn 3 languages. One is English, either as a second language or a third language or first language. Second is Hindi, either as a second language or a third language. And third is a modern Indian language, right? So if you are in the Hindi speaking area, like in Madhya Pradesh, then you learn a third language, which is a modern Indian language, either from southern India or eastern India, and so on. If you are in a non-Hindi speaking area, like in southern India or eastern India, you will learn that language, which is the local language. You will learn Hindi, and you will also learn English. So this was the formula that was made by all the states in the 1960s, which was carried over by various national education policies as well. But then we see that it is breached more than it is followed in our country, right? So many parts of the country don't follow the 3-language formula as envisaged by the committee, right? So for example, in Tamil Nadu, it's a 2-language formula, 2-language policy. They teach only English and Tamil in schools, right? The government schools. Of course, private schools, they have their own thing, and Kendriya Vidyalayas, of course, have their own central policy. In many Hindi-speaking states, the 3-language formula is bent. How is it bent? You have English, you have Hindi, and you have a cognate language for Hindi, like Sanskrit, which is used as a third language, right? So even though the formula says modern Indian language, we consider Sanskrit as a modern language and say, oh, we are following the 3-language formula. So there are scholars who argue that the 3-language formula is followed more in breach than in practice. Now, this is the policy, and we all know that English needs to be taught within this multilingual framework. We have a multilingual society, a richly multilingual society, and we need to teach English within this context. And we also need to preserve the multilingual nature of our society. Why do we need to preserve the multilingual nature of our society? One, we need to learn the languages of our heritage. So if you're a mother tongue speaker of a language, you learn that. If you are in a particular context, in a particular geographical context, you learn the language of that context, and so on and so forth, right? So you learn languages of the heritage, plus you learn languages needed for success. So English is not a local or a regional language for me, but English is required for me because I need to do this in life, right? So you learn languages for an extrinsic reason, for a reason which is associated with what you consider to be success, and you learn languages which are close to your heart or have something to do with your identity and so on, right? So you learn languages of heritage and languages needed for success, perceived as needed for success, right? So for when you consider both this, we need to preserve the multilingual nature of our society. So it's not like you erase the languages that you have in your mind and you put English in. That's not our purpose as teachers of English. Our purpose as teachers of English is to teach English along with the multilingual uh, nature, multilingual abilities that our students have, right? Okay, now we quickly come to ELT in India, English language teaching in India. Mostly we've borrowed, I mean, I was there in glimpses in the past few days, and I noticed some of you talking about these things, about grammar translation and about direct method and so on and so forth. Fantastic. Ideas we know in ELT are mostly borrowed from the West. There's nothing actually wrong with borrowing ideas from the West. I'm not saying all ideas from the West are horrible ideas, you should not borrow them. No. But when you're talking about teaching English in a context, now most of these countries we are borrowing ideas from, especially the UK and the US, English is their mother tongue. English is their L1, right? So when you have a context where English is their mother tongue, they are largely monolingual countries, not as multilingual as us, mostly English speaking. If somebody is born in England or in the US and you know only English, you can perform all the functions of your life and live successfully. There's no need for you to encounter, leave alone learn another language. For us, it's impossible. It's unimaginable, right? You cannot find even a grandmother in a remote village who is completely monolingual. For us, monolingual is not an option. We are multilingual by nature, at least bilingual, right? So we are borrowing ideas from a context where English is the mother tongue, where English is the only tongue, it's the only language spoken, and English is overwhelmingly present almost exclusively. Exclusively meaning no other language is actually present, right? So you go see notice boards, you see everything is only English. There's no need for them to include any other language. Just the people who other speakers who come in are either tourists or they are migrants, right? So different levels of exposure and motivation are available for people there, whereas it's different from that in India. English is primarily taught to migrants, people who come to that country to settle down there and who are not mother tongue speakers of English. They say, oh, well, if you're coming here, then you need to learn English in this way and so on and so forth. So you have your IELTS, your TOEFL, all those exams to test whether they are good, their English is good enough for them to settle down in that country or to study in that country and so on and so forth, right? So the purpose with which English is taught in the West is totally different from the purpose with which English is taught in India. The context where English is taught in those countries is different from the way in which English is taught in India. So that is why we argue against borrowing blindly the ideas from the West. We say that the Indian situation is totally different. English is present among other languages. It's not an exclusive language in India. We have various other languages. English is just another language like our languages. The motivation for learning English in India is very different as well, right? So migrants who are going to the West, their motivation is different. It's do or die. For us, it's not do or die. Yeah, well, if you're good in English, yeah, you might achieve certain things. If you're not that good, okay, fine, you can still live life greatly, right? So the way in which, I mean, the motivation as well as the context for us is quite different, right? So that is why we need a different paradigm for teaching English in India vis-a-vis or with respect to what is used in the West. Now, when we think about how we conceptualize language and how we conceptualize how we learn languages, which are both important factors for us as teachers of English, we see that we started with the idea that it's a creation of habit. So we had the structural method where we had the substitution tables, and we did things over and over again. So we said we make a habit and language is learned. So we thought that we had the idea of behaviorism, that you take language learning as a matter of habit, We moved from that idea to the Chomskyan idea that it is all in the mind, which is a cognitivist idea that, you make mental connections irrespective of who is around you and so on. You make mental connections and you learn, okay, in my language, these are the principles, these are the parameters, principles and parameters, and so on and so forth, which is mental connections, cognitivism. We've moved away from that as well to ideas like Vygotsky and so on. We say social constructivism is the idea that languages are not learned in isolation as an individual alone. Languages are learned through social interactions, right? Unless you meet people and you interact with them, you cannot learn languages. So we move from behaviorism to cognitivism to social constructivism. So from the past, when we were children, or maybe the generation earlier, the teacher was seen as the fountainhead of knowledge, like a jug, and the students were seen as empty vessels, mugs into which knowledge had to be poured forth. So the jugmug theory, we moved from that to knowledge co-construction. We say, okay, children come to our classrooms with some knowledges. I'm using plural on purpose. With some knowledges, the teacher, probably slightly more informed than the student, engages with the students, and we co-construct new knowledge. So these are not new things I'm saying. The NCF 2005, the NEP, all these mention knowledge co-construction, right? So we have moved from that context to this. Now, what is the role of teacher in India? It is not to teach a foreign language to mother tongue speakers of other languages in our context. That is the context in the West, not for us. It is not to help people integrate into an English speaking community like migrants in the West. That's not our purpose. Our purpose is to help equip learners to add English to their existing linguistic repertoire. So they come to a classroom with knowledges of certain languages. So say they know Bundelkhandi, they know Garhwali, they know Maithili, they know, I'm sorry about the pronunciation. I know it's Garhwali, but in hurry, I'm saying it like that. Yeah. They have certain languages that they come to the classroom with, and we add or help add a little bit more of English to their existing linguistic repertoire. Our purpose is not to wipe that clean with a duster and say, okay, now you take English. No, our purpose is to add English to their repertoire within the linguistically rich and diverse society that we have in India. Now, that's fantastic. Nice to hear. But how do we do that? Right? So this is the crux of what we're going to do today, using the L1 as a resource in the English classroom. Right? Traditionally, we've been taught as teachers of English that we must not use any other language in the classroom. We must use the direct method, right? So we must use only the target language, because the more they're exposed to the target language, the better the uptake will be. They'll learn the language better, and so on and so forth. So we've always seen the languages that our students come to the classroom with as problems, as things which we need to sort out, as things which we need to sort of avoid the interference from, right? Oh, you are saying school instead of school. Oh, this is mother tongue interference. Let me whitewash that and make you say school, right? So we have been brought up with the idea that we must not use any other language within the English classroom. Now that is a problem, right? We need to tap into the knowledge that students come to our classroom with, the knowledge of the existing languages, because there's ample research. Jim Cummins, Tov Skutnap Kanga, so many, Ajit Mohanty, so many scholars who have said mother tongue based multilingual education is the most suited for any child in any context across the world, right? And why is it that we need to take into account, as teachers of English, we need to take into account the fact that their existing languages are important? It is because of Jim Cummins' idea of common underlying proficiency. What does common underlying proficiency mean? It means that if you have the knowledge of one language in your mind already, it's not as if you teach another language, it's going to completely take another part of your brain. Most of that's the knowledge that you need to learn another language, you already have. You just add on to the existing knowledge and build on that, right? So for example, the iceberg model says, as you can see here, there are, suppose that black dots, the black waves that you see is the surface of the ocean, right? So it's like an iceberg. At the bottom, below the ocean, they are same. They share the same knowledge, right? But at the surface, you have surface features of L1, surface features of L2. L1 and L2 as an example can be L10, L12 even, whichever, how many languages you know. It's only in the surface features that these languages differ. Below the surface, they have the same thing, right? So if I can read in one language, it will help me read in the other language as well. It's not as if I have to start from scratch, right? I can use existing knowledge. That's the idea, right? So it's when it converts into the brain, common underlying proficiency idea, it's the same thing. So you use L1 or L2 as different channels to learn and to express, but what you learn is within the same thing, which is called the common underlying proficiency. That is why we need to tap into the knowledge of the existing languages, right? So multi-competence is seen as different from equal native-like competence in multiple languages. So I've tried to explain this using ABCD as an example. ABCD is a metaphor. I mean, it's not anything. I'm not referring to listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It's nothing. I'm not indicating anything like that. But I'm just saying parts of the language or components of the language or aspects of the language, right? So you can think of it like that. The West thinks of languages as, I know A language, I know B language, and I know A aspect of language, B aspect of a language, C aspect of a language, D aspect of language. So ABCD is one language, right? So all capitals that I put, it's the same way in which I need to know. So somebody who knows 4 languages, ABCD, 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 ABCD on the left, you have to have the same aspects of all the languages within your head. That's the Western concept, Western monolingual idea of learning multiple languages. But we see our context, we say, okay, I can perform these functions in English very well, but I cannot say a mantra in English. I can say a mantra only in Sanskrit. I can pray only in Sanskrit or in my mother tongue. I cannot pray in English, for example. I'm just giving an example, right? So I can dream in my language. I can ask for tender coconut to the vendor across the street in a certain language. I can ask, I can go to the petrol pump and say 1 liter of petrol, even though I know it's petrol, and I use language in a certain way. So what I'm saying is, when you have different ways in which you learn language, different aspects of certain languages that you learn, you can use all that as one idea, which is multi-competence. So I am competent in many languages, but I have different proficiency levels in each of them. I don't have to be equally proficient in all those languages. So for example, Dr. Ganga was saying he's proficient in 4 languages. Fantastic. I can understand 5 languages, right? So I'm most proficient in English. I can speak, I can conduct a lecture, I can understand a lecture, I can make a presentation, I can speak like this, and so on and so forth. I'm most fluent in English. I am also fluent in Hindi. So I can read a book, I can write in Hindi, and so on and so forth. In the other 3 languages, I am fluent in understanding, I am fluent in speech, especially informal speech, but I cannot give a lecture. I can probably not read a novel in that language, right? So if I get a WhatsApp forward with a lot of text, say this much text, I mean, I start reading and I said I give up. But if it's English or Hindi, I can read, right? So I have varying levels of proficiency in each of these languages. That's okay. The purposes for my use of those languages, I am able to fulfill those purposes. That is fine, right? So our understanding of what competence is or what proficiency is in the language is also has also changed. So how to use existing knowledge of languages in the English classroom? In the past, if we have used the learners' languages in the classroom, we have done it incidentally, almost feeling guilty. Oh my God, I allowed the mother tongue in the English classroom. I allowed Hindi. So if somebody comes for observation in the English classroom, we would make sure that we sterilize the environment. We say, no, we will only use English in the classroom, right? So we feel guilty about using the L1 of the learner in the classroom. We feel that, it's not the correct thing to do, but it's a necessary evil. We consider it as a necessary evil. We don't consider it as a resource, a useful resource. There are 3 ways in which traditionally people have used the L1 all very sparingly, especially only for beginner level. Never use it for advanced level or intermediate level, right? So one is the social reasons, right? So teacher wants to build a rapport. So for example, I know, okay, most of you are from Madhya Pradesh, you are fluent in Hindi. I throw in 3 or 4 Hindi words and say, oh, you think, okay, yeah, not bad, this South Indian fellow knows some Hindi, right? So you build a rapport. Just to build a rapport, you use the mother tongue of the learners. Two, managerial reasons. So you have to give instructions. You think, oh, what if they don't follow the instructions in English very clearly? Let me use some mother tongue for instructions, or for classroom management, or move to the back seat, come to the front seat, and so on and so forth, right? So only for uh, something which is not part of the lesson per se. Or third, for linguistic reasons, very, very carefully, very rarely, with a lot of guilt again. You know, sometimes you're trying to teach them vocabulary and you say, what is this word? Oh, well, how do I explain this to you? Girgit? Yeah, that's the word, right? So when I find a difficult word and I cannot translate it in English, the English terms are not understandable, then I just translate it into the mother tongue. Just go away, get away, just to help the child, help the learner at that point, and so on and so forth. Also, the other thing is to contrast how it happens in L1 and how it happens in L2. For example, in Indian languages, most of our languages are subject, object, verb ending, right? So but in English it's subject, verb, object. So we contrast. Okay, in English it's Ram killed Ravan, but in Hindi Ram ne Ravan ko mara. So you have SEO and it's SOV and so on, right? So only for that kind of stuff, very sparingly, we've used language, the L1 in our L2 classes. But what I'm recommending, and what many scholars recommend, is the intentional use of languages that the students have in the classroom, intentionally, without guilt, and with the purpose that I'm using these languages as a resource. How do we do that? Yeah, I'm going to quickly finish this. Yeah, intentional use of linguistic resources. So one is you can use multilingual glossaries. So you use a set of words that you use the English, the Hindi, the Bundelkhandi, the uh, Maithili, the Nepali, all the languages that are used in the classroom. You use all those and create a glossary which is multilingual, not merely English to Hindi, Hindi to English, and so on and so forth, right? Second, you can use parallel texts in 2 or more languages for reading comprehension. So you have a text of the same story in Hindi, the same story in Nepali, the same story in English, same story in some other language, and so on, right? So you use parallel texts, the same text in different languages for reading comprehension, right? So they read the text in one language, they read the text in another language, they read the text in the third language, and so on, right? So that is purposeful use of L1 as a resource. Now, most of you, as teachers of English, I'm hoping you might be following the coder process in the classroom for writing, right? Some of them use the acronym POWER, POWER, but I think in most CBSE schools we have CODER. In secondary school, at least when I was teaching, it was that like. So you tell the students that you have to have a 5-stage process while writing. You collect your ideas, you organize the ideas into paragraphs, then you draft your whatever you have to write, then you edit it, and then you revise it, right? So you have collect ideas, organize the ideas, draft your letter or essay or whatever, edit, and then revise. So you have a CODER steps. Those are steps in the process of writing. Now you can actually, I mean, the draft has to be written in the target language, in the L2 English, L3 or whatever that is. But if you, I mean, you can actually use L1 for both collecting the ideas as well as for organizing them. So they can just talk about the ideas. For example, they're doing pair work, group work, collecting ideas, brainstorming. They can do that in the L1. They can do that in the mother tongue. That doesn't matter, right? So they don't have to think, they don't have to brainstorm, they don't have to do everything in the L1, which was the traditional way. I said no use of L1 in the English classroom. You have to use only the target language in the classroom, right? So today we've moved on from that idea. Said collecting the ideas and organizing them can actually be done probably even in groups, by using the L1. And then the letter or whatever has to be written can be written individually in the target language, right? So even when the teacher collects those things and reads the drafts and gives feedback, that feedback can also be in L1. You don't have to use only English. So we've moved away from the idea that you have to use English exclusively in the classroom. We've moved away from that, and we say, okay, we can use other languages purposefully. Literary text. So if you have poetry and so on and so forth, what are the poetic devices used in? So you say Upma Alankar, Rupak Alankar, you use the L1 knowledge. So okay, what is Upma Alankar? Oh, it's simile in English. What is Rupak Alankar? Oh, it's metaphor in English, right? So you use the knowledge that you have of poetic devices in L1 to study the poetic devices in L2. So I don't have to technically know what is a metaphor per se, or to start from scratch when I look at an L2 text, if I already know what is Rupak Alankar in Hindi, right? So for example, that kind of stuff can also be done when you're teaching literature. While testing also, I mean, this is not the comprehensive, I'm just giving you an overview of what kind of things you can do as even today, I mean, in the classroom, even tomorrow, right? So in testing, questions can be asked in L1 for L2 speaking and writing. So I want them to write an essay. I don't have to ask the question in L2 in English. I can ask them in Hindi. I can ask them in the mother tongue and say, okay, this is what I want you to write a letter on, right? So the question can be in L1 because you're asking them to write it in L2. So their background work before they write or before they speak can be in L1. You don't have to limit yourself to using L2 all the time, even for that. The reverse also is true, right? So L2 comprehension, now you're giving them a reading text in English and you want to test whether they understood something. Why should their response be in English, right? So then if they're writing their answers in English, you're probably testing their knowledge of writing in English. But if you just want to check whether they can read, they can write the response in Hindi, no problem, right? So if they can understand that and write in Hindi, they have got the comprehension in L2 anyway, right? So you can twist what you think about what do you think about the use of the mother tongue in the L2 or in the English classroom is the primary point that I'm making. I have used many resources. I will share the list of resources that I've used when we have the time. Thank you very much. My name is Deepesh. That's my email ID and that's my phone number as well, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deepesh sir. The house is open for questions. If you have any questions, queries, please feel free to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any questions, queries, feedback, anything, please feel free to unmute and ask.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Vijayji.
Yeah, good
Please.
evening, sir.
Good evening.
Really, you have changed our traditional thoughts about teaching of English. I was one of the teachers who have been teaching for more than 30 years, and I have been avoiding the use of mother tongue. And if I had to use mother tongue, I used it with a sense of guilt because of various training programs and the views of the experts. But personally, I felt that the use of mother tongue, if it is done judiciously, helps in learning English.
Thank you. Yes.
That was my experience. But our experts said that you shouldn't speak in Hindi, you shouldn't use Hindi words. So
Yeah.
because of that, we often used it with a sense of guilt.
Yes.
And you have removed it. You have cleared our concepts, sir. Hats off to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. See, one of the things that we know instinctively as teachers, when you're saying you have 30 years of experience, I mean, as a teacher, instinctively we know that we are all the time having to deal with the students on the ground, right? The people
Yes.
who come from outer space and give training and so there's this and that and shoe and sha and all that. They don't have to go to the ground, right? They can sit
Yeah.
in they can sit comfortably there and give all the lectures. So we know what we have to do on the ground. We know the students' capabilities. We know the abilities that students have. We know our
Okay.
students the best, right? And what you're saying is amazing. Professor N.S. Prabhu, in his, I mean, he has always talked about this idea of the teacher's sense of plausibility, right? So an expert can say this and that, do this, suddenly start pair work, start group work, communicative language teaching, blah, blah, blah. But then it's the teacher on the ground who knows, will this work in my class? Will this not work? If it not work, how do I modify this to make it work in my class, right? So that's what Prabhu referred to as the teacher's sense of plausibility. So hats off to you. Please don't feel guilty. English is not sacrosanct, dropped from heaven, something heavenly, godly about it. English is just another language. I mean, remove those anxieties even from our students, because we think when the more we think of English as something which is very, very sacrosanct and sacred, the problem is we heighten the anxiety for use for our students as well. So you can just English is just another language. I mean, it's not a problem at all. Yeah. Thank you for that very interesting input.
Okay, thank you, sir. Very much thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deepesh.
Yeah.
You have changed my views because I have been asking my students to think in English when they are asked to write any composition or a letter. But definitely, a person thinks in mother tongue, not in English.
Exactly. No, that's the idea of Jim Cummins. I mean, please don't think these are all my ideas. My ideas are very minimal. I'm just passing on research that has been done by great scholars to you, right? So Jim Cummins, for example, is the one who has said there's a common underlying proficiency. Whichever language you do, there is an underlying proficiency that you have, and it only takes shape in a certain way on the surface, superficial features like pronunciation and spelling and those kinds of things in the
Yes.
visual
It's
language.
wonderful explanation.
Yeah.
Thank you for it.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Sharma. Yeah. Somebody asked for my email ID and number here. I'll do that. Yeah, please go ahead. I mean, you can ask me questions still. I mean, and the number is 99520 Yeah, please give me the context. If you're sending me a WhatsApp message, please give me the context. Say, you attended the NCRT seminar, talk and so on. Otherwise, I mean, without a context, I mean, don't flood me with messages. I don't know who you are in that sense, right? Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Any other? Yeah, Rajputji, please. Rajputji, please unmute and ask if you have raised your hand for.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, my question is that L language, L1 plays so vital role in the learning of any language and other subject. What in our textbook, the text has been selected such we are not familiar with the word. For example, 11th class, there is a lesson. In that lesson, we are teaching them so many parts of a shape. In MP, here there is no C. How it is possible for a child who lives in MP or UP to recognize all the parts of a boat or a ship? There is a word pal, but they use many words for that. So while we design or select such textbook, we should keep in mind the lesson should be from the background of the child, because atmosphere and L1 plays a vital role in the field of education.
Yeah, see, that's an interesting question, Mr. Rajput. I mean, I think there are two things that I want to touch upon as a response to that. One, I completely agree that the textbook writer or the materials creator has to keep in touch with the ground realities of the students who are going to be in the schools where these textbooks are going to be used. Definitely. So in that sense, I would say that, when we grew up, I mean, maybe the generation before us, texts were primarily from the West. So we only had daffodils. We only had an apple. We never had a mango in our textbook. We never had genda full in our textbook, right? So we didn't have texts which were from the Indian context. Today we've moved away from that in a big way. That is one. So I would not say that there has not been improvement. But flip side, just because my child, my student is not going to go into a ship today, I don't think we should deprive our students of the opportunity to know what are the parts of a ship, right? So the ship is an example. I mean, there snow, ice. I mean, for a student in Chennai, for example, what is the need for them to know what are the contours of an ice, a snowstorm, a hailstorm, and so on and so forth, which is never going to happen. No, that's dubious logic, because we are preparing our students to expand their vocabulary, expand their conceptual understanding of things. So in that sense, language is a medium in some sense to expand that. So I don't have a personal contest with a textbook writer who includes parts of a ship in the textbook. But uh, uh, when you're writing a textbook, you don't know. I mean, for example, textbooks are not written for individual schools, right? So nobody writes a textbook for just my school. Within my school, each class, each section is different, right? So how do I cater my textbook to the individual class? That is the work of the teacher, right? So textbooks, especially NCRT context, for example, textbooks are written for the entire country. I mean, they cannot leave out those who are in the Himalayas. They're only seeing the mountains and this one. They have no idea what's happening in the coast. Those who are in the coast have no idea about what is happening in the mountains. So I mean, the textbook writer cannot take into account everybody when they're writing a textbook. So the teacher's role in that is to provide the scaffolding which is required. It's okay. This is, you give an interesting context of what happens on the ship. Maybe a YouTube video about what are the things about the terms that are used in the ship can be used in the thing, and so on and so forth. So that kind of scaffolding has to be done by the teacher. So I won't find complete fault with the textbook writer, because I mean, the textbook writer is just shooting blind. I mean, I don't know what my student needs, right? So you are writing for an audience which you're not familiar fully with. You're just making an estimate or an intelligent guess and saying, okay, probably these are the kinds of students. So I mean, I might have to include this kind of text. So you can't have 100% relevant, absolutely perfect in terms of context text for the students in that sense.
My curiosity is that I want to suggest that for India that is so multilingual and there are so many cultures, they at least their literature book or language book would be in the regional content.
True.
That is my point.
Point taken.
While we are writing a book, that same book cannot be taught from Assam to Gujarat in lower classes.
True.
While we are enforcing them to enforce all the NCRT books.
Yes.
But it is not possible in lower classes to prescribe them. That is my point.
Yeah, that's true. I agree to that extent. Yes.
Lower classes, there should be some.
Yeah.
Sir,
yes.
just I have to add one point to Rajput sir. Myself and Rajput sir and other teachers of English, we have made a comparative study of textbooks of NCRT and the textbooks used by Madhya Pradesh Pathya Pustak Nigam. And we have given our recommendation in the process of implementation of NEP 2020. And we have posted those recommendations in this group also.
Very
online
nice.
training. I would like all the subject experts and specialists to go through it. And if there is anything useful in it, if you find, please pass this to specialists, because we have tried to present the difficulties of teachers, but I don't find anyone eager to listen to our difficulties.
No, I think all curriculum creators, syllabus writers, syllabus creators, and materials writers, they have to be in constant touch with the people people on the ground, because they have to. They are the ones who are maneuvering this thing, right? So you can sit on a citadel and say, oh well, this is going to work in the classroom. It's just a guesswork. It's the people who are on the ground who actually have to face the music. So absolutely, I completely agree that teachers are the best placed persons to give that feedback to the materials writers. And I do hope that the Madhya Pradesh state textbook writers writing committee can take into account your suggestions. Very good that you're giving them the feedback. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Any other question or query or argument you have about what I was saying? I mean, I think my talk must have been one of the most controversial, because I was like, I was going on a totally different tangent in that sense from traditional knowledge. Yeah.
All right, I think we have taken a lot of questions and a lot of discussion has also taken place. And I think the discussion has been really very fruitful and useful, and a lot has come out. And I think this course is going to be entirely different in the sense that many of them are saying that we are coming out from the traditional mindset. We used to have this kind of setup, whether this may be your session, Deepesh sir, or Deepa ma'am session, or Geeta ma'am session, or many other similar sessions. It's like we are breaking the boundaries of what used to be in the classroom to what should be in the classroom, and
Yes.
also NEP's input and the suggestions are taken into consideration. Like your point also is that how multilingualism can act as a resource and not compelling the learners into just target language,
Yes.
rather using the language of the learners or the community around as the resource, and helping using that language to develop the target language that we are trying to build develop in our learners.
Yes.
So this way, I
One
think,
point, Mr. Ganga. Uh, uh,
yes, sir, yes, Vijay sir.
we have posted our study and we have presented everything with proof, and it is posted in the online training group. I personally request you to please look into it and see if it is useful and
Right, sir.
convey our,
The analysis of the textbook you're talking about.
and there are some recommendations from the point of view of teachers also.
Right, right. That can be a very relevant document. I think I was not aware of that, and right now I just heard just a few minutes ago when you are referring to that, I
Yeah.
heard that. Please do share that with my personal WhatsApp, because in the group a lot of conversation happens and the main
Okay.
content may get lost. So do share
I,
that, and I'll certainly
Actually,
look
you can
into
write
that.
an email to Dr. Ganga. I think that would be very good.
That will
okay.
be also very good. So if you
Can
can
you
email
give
me to
me
that,
your
yes.
number, sir? Your number?
No, you
My
can write an
number.
email gmahto@ncrt.nic.in. I think that would be
Okay.
best thing. And an email he would definitely look at. And that, since it's a document on WhatsApp, sometimes those documents become,
Yes,
very
yes.
Okay.
difficult to maneuver. For example,
Okay.
I get documents and I'm like, oh God, no, what do I do with this? So I have to share it to my own email to just have to get a hang of it. So it's best to send it as an email.
As an
I
email.
think it would be a useful thing. And then Dr. Ganga is a magician in many ways. I'm sure he'll make sure the feedback reaches the text writers.
And
Thank you.
that is what we request to him, sir.
Yeah.
I'll
So
certainly
best
do
is you
that.
send him an email. I think it is gmahato@ncrt.nic.in, right?
NIC.in. Yes, yes, right, sir, right, sir. You remembered it now. I am typing it again.
Yeah, better. Yeah. Better. तिवारी जी उसको उस मेल पे भेज दीजिए, आप बेटर
जी
रहेगा.
If you
जी
send
जी
it to email, it will certainly come to me, and I'll
हाँ,
certainly look into
वही
that, sir.
वही ऑफिशियल
ओके
मेल है तो देख लेंगे पक्का.
Because whenever we do, I think Deepesh sir knows, whenever we do any documentation, we send it through official mail. It
Yeah.
keeps a record, and also you say
Yes,
that, okay, I have
you can
sent it.
always go back to it and search. You can maneuver. There are so many things actually. Yes.
Yes,
ओ
yes.
ओके सर ओके
Right, right, right. So with that, Geeta ma'am is also there. May I request
I
ma'am?
just saw her briefly.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, Geeta ma'am.
Geeta ma'am was not able to come in earlier. I
Oh,
just
okay.
came in at the last minute. Very sorry, Deepesh. I wanted to
No
hear
problem.
what you had been doing. Anyway, I'll catch up with you later, Deepesh. How did
Sure,
the
ma'am.
session go?
Well, I'm not the right person to say
I
what.
know. Good evening to all of you. I hope you remember me. I did a session on researching in the classroom.
Good evening,
Yes.
ma'am. How can
Yes,
we
ma'am.
forget
Good
you?
evening to
The
all of you.
session was awesome.
गुड इवनिंग मैम
Oh, thank you.
Ma'am,
Ganga, nice
I'd
to
like
know
to
things
let
are
you know,
going well.
ma'am. I'd like to let you know, ma'am, we are recording all the sessions, and I have downloaded all the sessions. and I'm creating a YouTube channel on which I'll upload all these documents, all these recordings,
Excellent.
and
So
I'll
that,
share them in the
no, I
group
was
so that
Ganga, I was
everyone
just going to ask you that I know other teachers who will benefit. Can we share this with them? Because it's a common training program.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We can share it with anyone, ma'am, because they are new topics. And for the first time, many of these topics are coming for the first time. So maybe like
Exactly.
teachers autonomy and all. So we can share it with all the teachers across India. They can get benefited out of
Exactly.
it.
Hi, Poonam. Hi, Sudesh. Hi, Smita.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Vijay. Nice to see all of you again.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening,
It's like
ma'am.
meeting old
Thank you, ma'am.
friends.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ganga sir, for creating YouTube channel. We have missed 2 or 3 sessions also in the starting, so it will be beneficial for all of us.
Yes, I'll do that, ma'am. Please
Thank
join
you so
this
much.
WhatsApp group. I have created also one WhatsApp group of all MP teachers. They were separate smaller groups, and we could not manage everyone in that group. Like many links could not be shared, and many other things could not be shared. So one
Okay.
common group
Good
for
day to
all the
all of
teachers
you.
of MP. All the teachers of MP, one common group is there. I have shared a link in the group. I request every member to share in the other groups. आप जैसे विजय सर आप किसी और ग्रुप में हैं जहां मैंने वो लिंक शेयर नहीं किया है. I've just shared that into 2 groups, one online and the other is Chihor districts group. If you are into any other districts group where I could not share the link, please do share the link so that anyone from MP can join that there. And
Sure, sir.
then if we share the link or feedback form in any other document, it can reach to the wider audience, to the larger audience, and not limited to 1 or 2 districts. So I request you all to join that group so that I can share the link easily and everyone can access any content that we are sharing. Also, all the PPTs that we have used, I will request all the resource persons to share them so that I can also share those PPT along with the recordings. Thank you very much, Deepesh sir, on behalf of all
I'll straight away share the PPT because then
Yes,
it's easy.
right. So, on behalf of all the participants, I'd like to thank you, Deepesh, sir, for sharing your ideas about multilingualism as a resource in language learning. And I think it's a very, very important session of NEP also. And this session must have been very, very useful session for our teachers in this group. Thank you very much for sparing the time and talking to them and also taking up their questions. I think
Thank you.
Thank you,
That's the
Deepesh
link
sir.
to my
Thank you, sir.
PPT.
Thank you, Deepesh
There are
sir.
some things which might not work, like the mentee may not work for you. That's okay. But the rest of it, all the ideas are there. I'm sorry I've not put in references because I didn't want to overload you with all that. This is the copy to my PPT. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for
thank
the
you.
opportunity. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll stop the meeting here. It has been really wonderful session also. We'll stop it and meet again tomorrow morning at 9:40. Deepti ma'am, namaste. I missed you. आप कहाँ थे?
सर यहीं थे, आप ही के पास थे.
मैम आप हाँ आपने वीडियो ऑन नहीं किया था इसलिए नहीं दिखे थे. Right.
Okay, sir, but I have written all what is delivered here. Really, I am gratitude to all the scholars. Really, thank you. And
Thank you very much all. We can end the meeting now. Thank you. You can leave the
every
meeting now.
session is very beautiful for our classroom. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll meet again tomorrow at 10:20, 10:15.
Thank you,
10:15,
sir.
let's start
Yeah.
it.
Thank you.
By
Thank you.
10:20, we'll all join. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Good
Bye,
night.
ma'am. Bye,
Thank you.
Deepesh sir. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Recording, can you close the recording, the organizers? आप recording बंद कर दीजिए थोड़ा. Even I can do that. I think stop recording. Yeah.